Deep in the forest, not far from a popular campsite, lives a spry old hermit known to many as Stringshoe. The old man has lived alone for decades in a small A-frame shelter, hobbled together with beams cut from one of the surrounding oak trees and covered entirely in moss. This secluded spot was ideal from the start, built into the side of a grassy hill shaded by towering oaks. There is no one else around for miles, and Stringshoe has enjoyed the natural resources to his heart's content. Over the years, however, more and more campers flock here in search of a good scare. Teenagers and adults alike dare each other to venture into the woods at midnight to seek out the mysterious woodland hermit who will tempt them with a story around the campfire in the center of a supposed haunted clearing. Ghosts or creatures will make themselves known if you're brave enough to stay. Most campers run out of the woods scared before Stringshoe is even finished with his post-story pranks. The clever trickster has a feeling tonight will be no different. Of course, Stringshoe gives no merit to these horror tales, all based on local folklore. He does, however, get a kick out of scaring folks out of his woods. Before emerging from his mossy home, precisely 1 minute to midnight, Stringshoe slips on his distinctive moccasins, each woven from a single piece of string, and adjusts the wide brim of the floppy hat atop his head. His flowing cloak is cinched tight around his waist, and he carries a simple wooden torch to light the way. With each step closer to the clearing, twigs snap under Stringshoe's feet, and the dried leaves lining the path make a satisfying crunch. There is definitely a chill in the air, and mist is creeping down from the hills. A full moon hanging high in the sky only adds to the atmosphere. Perfect for a good scare. Like a glowing beacon, the campfire in the center of the clearing guides Stringshoe the rest of the way to the tree line. A group of teenagers are gathered around the crackling fire, anxiously awaiting his arrival. Without hesitation, Stringshoe steps out into the clearing, his voice creating a haunting echo. "Found what you're looking for?" The startled campers jump to their feet and continue to stare at the stranger for a long moment with wide, fearful eyes. The old man teases with a sly smile. "Frightened already?"
Are you Stringshoe?"
one brave soul whispers. The moonlight reflecting off Stringshoe's crooked nose is all the campers can see of his face. The rest of it hidden in shadow thanks to the floppy hat. "How's about I tell you a story, and after that you can tell me if I'm this Stringshoe you've been looking for." Keeping a good distance away from the others, Stringshoe takes a seat by the fire. Without pause, Stringshoe begins to tell a story about a woodsman who once lived in these very woods. Back some 50 years ago, a woodsman named Buck felled in these here woods every day for an entire season. That is, until one day he came across a big old oak tree that seemed oddly out of place. You see, when the woodsman brought an axe to this tree, the tree stood strong. The sharpest axe blade bounced off bark, not leaving a mark. The woodsman grew frustrated real quick and returned to felling the surrounding trees, unable to forget that stubborn oak. But Buck was a determined fellow. This old oak tree was one of the last trees standing, and he needed to sell less wood. Now, the woodsman could have sworn this tree was changing locations overnight, somehow, some way. He didn't think much of it till he tried taking it down with a chainsaw. It looked like chainsaw was working at first. But before the woodsman could celebrate, a foul-smelling liquid, red like blood, came gushing out from the cut in the tree. It ran all over the chainsaw and down the woodsman's hands. Buck dropped the chainsaw and ran as fast as he could, all the way back to camp. The woodsman thought he was going mad, hearing heavy footsteps around the camp and at night unnatural sounds echoing in the darkness. One night, Buck's shack was attacked by something unknown, and when he went outside to see what it could be, there was nothing there. The woodsman was convinced the forest he'd felled was out to get him. He wasn't going to leave though. Buck could chop down every tree in the whole forest if he wanted. Stringshoe takes a moment to pause and adds 2 more logs to the crackling fire.
So, what happens to this guy?
An anxious camper asks. Buck went into town. He got some dynamite and tried blasting the old oak tree straight out of the ground, but it was no use. Once the smoke cleared, Buck couldn't believe his eyes. The tree was still standing, and the soil around it, undisturbed. By now, the woodsman thought he was completely mad. He growled and got up real close to the oak, cursing and kicking it with his boots. Quickly, the clearing went silent. Not even a cricket chirped. He turned to look around, when all of a sudden, the leafy end of a heavy oak branch clapped onto his shoulder from behind. Before Buck knew what was happening, all of the oak branches were pulling him into the bark. The last thing the woodsman saw was his axe in the clearing he so mercilessly fell. You know, it's believed somewhere near this very clearing, Buck's tortured face can be seen encased in the trunk of a giant old oak tree. Once the story ends, everyone around the fire thanks Stringshoe for the story. The old man notices a couple of teens craning their necks, hoping to spot the killer tree. They douse the fire and return to their campsite a short distance into the trees on the other side of the clearing. The old man smiles smugly to himself. Although a few campers did not seem too impressed by his favorite tale, Stringshoe is certain the spooky pranks he has rigged in the camp will send this group running from the forest screaming. First, Stringshoe must return home and eat. With a dried log under each arm, he follows the familiar pathway back to his home in the hill. Nothing strikes him as unusual until he sits down for supper. Heavy footsteps are approaching his shelter, the sound of crunching leaves underfoot getting louder and louder. Stringshoe grumbles. Must be those darn kids. He drops the wooden spoon into the bubbling stew and makes a move for the entrance. He can see, beyond the mossy flaps, that the bright moon is now hidden behind thick clouds, and the air is eerily still. Not a human in sight. The disembodied footsteps are getting closer, as if someone is passing right in front of him. Could the campers be trying to scare him? Did they find his ghostly tricks? Without a second thought, Stringshoe takes his torch and follows the sound. Back down the path the footsteps lead, the path he cut into the forest decades ago. It looks different now, somehow, in the near darkness. The bottom hem of his flowing cloak snags on a low-hanging branch, making Stringshoe drop the torch. Having no light only infuriates Stringshoe more. He curses under his breath, snapping the branch in retaliation. "You can't scare me from these woods. These are my woods!" Stringshoe shouted into the eerie cold, snapping all the hanging branches between him and the clearing. When he finally reaches the edge of the tree line, Stringshoe is quickly knocked to the ground by a heavy swinging branch. The tree limbs, they are multiplying. He screams into the darkness, desperately clawing at swarming branches, attempting to surround him in a cocoon. Has he truly gone mad? The more Stringshoe struggles, the tighter the branches wrap themselves around his limbs, dragging the old man toward the white trunk of a giant oak tree. Like a marionette, Stringshoe is lifted to his feet. The branches are pulling him closer until the back of his head is pressing into the unforgiving bark. The tree slowly encasing Stringshoe's arms, his face, and eventually his entire body. The last thing the old trickster sees are his moccasins hanging by their strings from the twisted branch of the big old oak tree.